New France's government under the French crown consisted of a sovereign council consisting of 3 major officials: a governor-general, an intendant, and a bishop, and a number of minor officials, including 5 councilors, an attorney general, and a clerk. The Sovereign Council was to be the sole governing authority in the colony, and the intermediary between the king in France and his overseas subjects in New France.
One morning, as Count Frontenac sat at the head of the council board, the bishop on his right hand and the intendant on his left, a woman made her appearance with a sealed packet of papers. She was the wife of the councillor Amour, whose chair was vacant at the table. Important business was in hand, the registration of a royal edict of amnesty to the coureurs de bois. The intendant, who well knew what the packet contained, demanded that it should be opened. Frontenac insisted that the business before the council should proceed. The intendant renewed his demand, the council sustained him, and the packet was opened accordingly. It contained a petition from Amour stating that Frontenac had put him in prison because, having obtained in due form a passport to send a canoe to his fishing station of Matane, he had afterwards sent a sailboat thither without applying for another passport. Frontenac had sent for him and demanded by what right he did so. Amour replied that he believed that he had acted in accordance with the intentions of the king, whereupon, to borrow the words of the petition, "Monsieur the Governor fell into a rage and said to your petitioner, 'I will teach you the intentions of the king, and you shall stay in prison till you learn them,' and your petitioner was shut up in a chamber of the chateau wherein he still remains." He proceeds to pray that a trial may be granted him according to law. Discussions now ensued which lasted for days, and now and then became tempestuous. The governor, who had declared that the council had nothing to do with the matter, and that he would not waste time in talking about it, was not always present at the meetings, and it sometimes became necessary to depute one or more of the members to visit him. Auteuil, the attorney general, having been employed on this unenviable errand, begged the council to dispense him from such duty in future, by reason, as he says, of the abuse, ill-treatment, and threats which he received from Monsieur the Governor, when he last had the honour of being deputed to confer with him, the particulars whereof he begs to be excused from reporting, lest the anger of Monsieur the Governor should be kindled against him still more. Frontenac, hearing of this charge, angrily denied it, saying that the Attorney General had slandered and insulted him, and that it was his custom to do so. Auteuil rejoined that the governor had accused him of habitual lying, and told him that he would have his hand cut off. All these charges and counter-charges may still be found entered in due form on the old records of the council at Quebec. It was as usual upon the intendant that the wrath of Frontenac fell most fiercely. He accuses him of creating cabals and intrigues, and causing not only the council, but all the country, to forget the respect due to the representative of His Majesty. Once, when Frontenac was present at the session, a dispute arose about an entry on the record. A draft of it had been made in terms agreeable to the governor, who insisted that the intendant should sign it. Duchesneau replied that he and the clerk would go into the adjoining room, where they could examine it in peace and put it into a proper form. Frontenac rejoined that he would then have no security that what he said in the council would be accurately reported. Duchesneau persisted, and was going out with the draft in his hand, when Frontenac planted himself before the door, and told him that he should not leave the council chamber till he had signed the paper. "Then I will get out of the window, or else stay here all day," returned Duchesneau. A lively debate ensued, and the governor at length yielded the point. The imprisonment of Amour was short, but strife did not cease. The disputes in the council were accompanied throughout with other quarrels which were complicated with them, and which were worse than all the rest, since they involved more important matters and covered a wider field. They related to the fur trade, on which hung the very life of the colony. Merchants, traders, and even habitants were ranged in 2 contending factions. Of one of these Frontenac was the chief. With him were La Salle and his lieutenant Laforêt, Duluth, the famous leader of coureurs de bois, Boisseau, agent of the farmers of the revenue, Berrois, the governor's secretary, Bizarre, lieutenant of his guard, and various other of greater or less influence. On the other side were the members of the council, with Aubert de la Chesnaye, Le Moyne and all his sons, Louis Joliette, Jacques Lebert, Sorel, Boucher, Varenne, and many more, all supported by the intendant Duchesneau, and also by his fast allies, the ecclesiastics. The faction under the lead of the governor had every advantage, for it was sustained by all the power of his office. Duchesneau was beside himself with rage. He wrote to the court letters full of bitterness, accused Frontenac of illicit trade, denounced his followers, and sent huge bundles of procès-verbaux and attestations to prove his charges. But if Duchesneau wrote letters, so too did Frontenac. And if the Intendant sent proofs, so too did the governor. Upon the unfortunate king, and still the more unfortunate minister, fell the difficult task of composing the quarrels of their servants 3,000 miles away. They treated Duchesneau without ceremony. Colbert wrote to him, "I have examined all the letters, papers, and memorials that you sent me by the return of the vessels last November, and though it appears by the letters of M. de Frontenac that his conduct leaves something to be desired, there is assuredly far more to blame in yours than in his. As to what you say concerning his violence, his trade with the Indians, and in general all that you allege against him, the king has written to him his intentions. But since, in the midst of all your complaints, you say many things which are without foundation, or which are no concern of yours, it is difficult to believe that you act in the spirit which the service of the king demands. That is to say, without interest and without passion. If a change does not appear in your conduct before next year, His Majesty will not keep you in your office." At the same time, the king wrote to Frontenac, alluding to the complaints of Duchesneau, and exhorting the governor to live on good terms with him. The general tone of the letter is moderate, but the following significant warning occurs in it. "Although no gentleman in the position in which I have placed you ought to take part in any trade, directly or indirectly, either by himself or any of his servants, I nevertheless now prohibit you absolutely from doing so. Not only abstain from trade, but act in such a manner that nobody can even suspect you of it. And this will be easy, since the truth will readily come to light." Exhortation and warning were vain alike. The first ships which returned that year from Canada brought a series of dispatches from the Intendant, renewing all his charges more bitterly than before. The minister, out of patience, replied by berating him without mercy. "You may rest assured," he concludes, "that did it not appear by your later dispatches that the letters you have received have begun to make you understand that you have forgotten yourself, it would not have been possible to prevent the king from recalling you." Duchesneau, in return, protests all manner of deference to the governor, but still insists that he sets the royal edicts at naught, protects a host of coureurs de bois who are in league with him, corresponds with Duluth, their chief, shares his illegal profits, and causes all the disorders which afflict the colony. "As for me, Monseigneur, I have done everything within the scope of my office to prevent these evils, but all the pains I have taken have only served to increase the aversion of Monsieur the Governor against me, and to bring my ordinances into contempt. This, Monseigneur, is a true account of the disobedience of the coureurs de bois, of which I twice had the honor to speak to Monsieur the Governor, and I could not help telling him with all possible deference that it was shameful to the colony and to us that the king, our master, of whom all the world stands in awe, who has just given law to all Europe, and whom all his subjects adore, should have the pain of knowing that in a country which has received so many marks of his paternal tenderness, his orders are violated and scorned, and a governor and an intendant stand by with folded arms, content with saying that the evil is past remedy. For having made these representations to him, I drew on myself words so full of contempt and insult, that I was forced to leave his room to appease his anger. The next morning I went to him again, and did all I could to have my ordinances executed. But as Monsieur the Governor is interested with many of the coureurs de bois, it is useless to attempt to do anything. He has gradually made himself master of the trade of Montreal, and as soon as the Indians arrive, he sets guards in their camp, which would be very well if these soldiers did their duty and protected the Indians from being annoyed and plundered by the French, instead of being employed to discover how many furs they have brought with a view to future operations. Monsieur the Governor then compels the Indians to pay his guards for protecting them, and he has never allowed them to trade with the inhabitants till they had first given him a certain number of packs of beaver skins, which he calls his presents. His guards trade with them openly at the fair with their bandoliers on their shoulders. He says, farther, that Frontenac sends up goods to Montreal and employs persons to trade in his behalf, and that, what with the beaver skins exacted by him and his guards under the name of presents, and those which he and his favorites obtain in trade, only the smaller part of what the Indians bring to market ever reaches the people of the colony. This dispatch, and the proofs accompanying it, drew from the king a sharp reproof to Frontenac. What has passed in regard to the coureur de bois is entirely contrary to my orders, and I cannot receive an excuse for it your allegation that it is the Intendant who countenances them by the trade he carries on, for I perceive clearly that the fault is your own. As I see that you often turn the orders that I give you against the very object for which they are given, beware not to do so on this occasion. I shall hold you answerable for bringing the disorder of the coureur de bois to an end throughout Canada, and this you will easily succeed in doing if you make a proper use of my authority. Take care not to persuade yourself that what I write to you comes from the ill offices of the Intendant. It results from what I fully know from everything which reaches me from Canada, proving too well what you are doing there. The bishop, the ecclesiastics, the Jesuit fathers, the Supreme Council, and in a word everybody complain of you. But I am willing to believe that you will change your conduct, and act with the moderation necessary for the good of the colony. Colbert wrote in a similar strain, and Frontenac saw that his position was becoming critical.